Man sees the ocean recede and finds 1782 bottle with a note inside. What was written? Marcus Henderson was walking along the beach in Outer Banks with a heavy heart, trying to sort out his thoughts after another argument with his wife about his unknown origins. At 40 years old, the crescent moon-shaped mark on his right shoulder remained the only trace of a past he had never been able to uncover. That's when he noticed the tide was exceptionally low that October morning, revealing parts of the beach he had never seen before. Among the exposed seaweed and shells, something glimmered under the golden dawn light. It was an old bottle, half buried in the wet sand, with something inside that looked like paper. Marcus picked up the bottle with trembling hands. The glass was thick and dark, clearly very old. Inside, a yellowed piece of paper was folded several times. He broke the wax seal that still kept the bottle closed and carefully removed the note. The words were written in Old Portuguese but still legible. The date at the top made him freeze 1782. The note spoke of a hidden treasure on a local property and, even more astonishingly, specifically mentioned a crescent moon-shaped birthmark. "This can't be true," murmured Marcus, automatically touching his right shoulder where his mark was hidden under his shirt. He read the note several times, trying to process the information. The property mentioned was in the historic center of town, a place he knew well. It was an old colonial inn that had belonged to the Mitchell family for generations. Marcus put the note in his pocket and walked back home, his mind buzzing with possibilities. His wife Jennifer was preparing coffee when he arrived. "Where were you so early?" she asked without looking up from the table. "Just walking on the beach," replied Marcus, deciding not to mention the discovery yet. Something made him want to investigate alone first. During breakfast, he watched Jennifer in silence. They had been together for 15 years, but lately conversations about his adoption created constant tension between them. She didn't understand why he needed so badly to find out where he came from. "Marcus, are you going to have that look on your face all day?" questioned Jennifer, finally looking at him. "I'm fine," he lied, finishing his coffee quickly. "I have some things to take care of in town today." Jennifer sighed. She knew that tone of voice. Marcus had something on his mind related to his past, and it always bothered her deeply. After Jennifer left for work, Marcus took out the note again and studied it more carefully. The handwriting was elegant, the words chosen with care. Whoever had written it was an educated person, probably from a good family. He decided to go to the public library to research the Mitchell family and the history of the inn. The librarian, Mrs. Dorothy, was a lady of about 70 who knew every detail of local history. "Good morning, Mrs. Dorothy," greeted Marcus as he arrived at the library. "Hello, my dear. How can I help you today? I'd like to know about the Mitchell family and the colonial inn in the historic center." Mrs. Dorothy looked at him curiously. "The Windward Inn? It's one of the oldest properties in town. The Mitchell family has been there for over 200 years. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Marcus felt a shiver down his spine. 200 years would be enough time to connect with the 1782 date on the note. "Mrs. Eleanor still runs the inn," continued Mrs. Dorothy. "She's the last of the direct Mitchell lineage, a very private woman, never married. And what do you know about the family's history?" "Well, there have been some strange stories over the years. They talk about a scandal in the 18th century, but nothing confirmed. The family has always been very discreet about the past." Marcus thanked him for the information and left the public library with his heart racing. It was time to visit the Windward Inn and meet Mrs. Eleanor Mitchell. The inn was on a cobblestone street in the heart of the historic district. The white colonial building with blue windows seemed to breathe history from every pore. Marcus took a deep breath before pushing open the heavy wooden entrance door. The interior retained the charm of the colonial era, with antique furniture and paintings that appeared to have witnessed centuries of stories. Behind the reception desk was a woman with graying hair pulled into an elegant bun. "Good afternoon," said Marcus. "I'd like to speak with Mrs. Eleanor Mitchell." The woman looked at him carefully, her brown eyes seeming to study every detail of his face. "I am Eleanor Mitchell. How can I help you?" "My name is Marcus Henderson. I found something that might be connected to your family's history." Marcus noticed that Mrs. Eleanor became visibly tense upon hearing these words. Her hands gripped the edge of the counter. "What kind of connection?" she asked cautiously. Marcus took the note from his pocket and placed it on the counter. Mrs. Eleanor looked at the yellowed paper, and all color drained from her face. "Where did you find this?" she whispered. "In a bottle on the beach during low tide this morning." Mrs. Eleanor picked up the note with trembling hands and read it quickly. When she finished, her hands were visibly shaking. "I need you to leave," she said abruptly, returning the note. This thing has nothing to do with my family." "But, Mrs. Eleanor, the note specifically mentions this property. And there's something else." Marcus opened his shirt and showed the birthmark on his shoulder. Mrs. Eleanor looked at the mark and her eyes filled with tears. "Please leave," she repeated, her voice now breaking. "I can't help you." "Mrs. Eleanor, I was adopted as a baby. I never knew where I came from. This might be the only clue I have about my real family." "I said I can't help you," she shouted, stepping out from behind the counter. "You need to leave now." Marcus saw the desperation in the woman's eyes and realized he had touched on something very deep and painful. He put the note away and slowly backed away. "I'm sorry to have bothered you," he said. "But if you ever want to talk, I'll be in town." When Marcus left the inn, Mrs. Eleanor quickly closed the door and leaned against it, breathing heavily. Her hands were still shaking uncontrollably. Marcus walked through the streets of the historic district without any clear direction, trying to process Mrs. Eleanor's reaction. She clearly recognized the note and was deeply disturbed by his presence. This only confirmed that there was some real connection. As he passed a small snack bar, he decided to stop for coffee and gather his thoughts. The owner of the establishment, a middle-aged man named Richard, was known for chatting with all the customers. "First time I've seen you around here," commented Richard as he served the coffee. "I'm not from around here, but I'm looking into some things about my family." "Family? What family are you from?" "Actually, I don't know. I was adopted, but there might be some connection to the Mitchells at the Colonial Inn." Richard stopped wiping the counter and looked at Marcus with renewed interest. "The Mitchells? That's a family full of secrets. My grandfather always said there were strange things happening in that house over the years." "What kind of strange things?" "Well, long ago they talked about children who disappeared, about people who came at night and were never seen again, but that was decades ago, maybe generations." Marcus felt a chill. "Did your grandfather mention anything about a scandal involving a baby?" Richard lowered his voice. "Look, my grandfather passed away about 10 years ago, but he always told a story about Mrs. Eleanor having a child in her youth, and that the baby was given up for adoption. That was about 40 years ago." Marcus's heart raced violently. 40 years was exactly his age. "Did your grandfather know any details about that baby?" "He used to say the family was ashamed because the baby's father was a poor fisherman. Mrs. Eleanor's grandmother, a very strict woman, forced her to get rid of the baby." Marcus had to lean on the counter to keep from staggering. The pieces were starting to fall together in a disturbing way. "Do you know any old fishermen in the area who might know about this story?" "There's old Walter at the harbor. He's been fishing here for over 50 years. If anyone knows anything, it's him." Marcus thanked him and paid for the coffee, heading straight for the town harbor. The sun was already beginning to set when he arrived at the place where the fishermen kept their boats. Old Walter was mending his nets when Marcus approached. He was a man with completely white hair, sunburned skin, and hands calloused from decades of work at sea. "Excuse me, Mr. Walter." The fisherman looked up and studied Marcus for a few seconds. "How can I help you, son?" "I'm looking for information about a fisherman who might have been involved with a girl from the Mitchell family about 40 years ago." Walter stopped working on the net and was silent for a long time. Finally, he sighed deeply. "Why do you want to know about Thomas?" "Thomas?" "Thomas Crawford. He was the fisherman who fell head over heels for the Mitchell's daughter. A sad story, my son." Marcus sat on a nearby fish crate, his legs trembling. "Can you tell me the story?" "Thomas was a hard-working, honest young man, but poor. He fell in love with Eleanor when she was about 30. They used to meet in secret because her family would never accept a fisherman. And what happened? Eleanor got pregnant. When the family found out, they forbade any contact between the two. Thomas tried to fight for their love and the child, but he had neither the resources nor the influence to stand up to the Mitchells. And the baby? It was given up for adoption right after birth. Thomas never got to meet his son. He disappeared from town shortly after. They say he couldn't bear the pain. Marcus felt tears burning his eyes. Do you know if the baby had any special marks? Ah, that I remember well. Thomas told me his son had a birthmark on his shoulder, shaped like a crescent moon. He said it was a sign that the child was special. Marcus opened his shirt and showed his mark to Walter. The old fisherman looked, and his hands began to tremble. Good Lord, you are Thomas's son? It seems so, whispered Marcus, tears now streaming freely down his face. Walter stood up and hugged Marcus tightly. My God, after all these years. Thomas would be so happy to know you're alive and well. Where is my father now? Walter's expression grew sad. Thomas left town 40 years ago and never came back. No one knew where he went or what happened to him. Marcus felt a mix of relief and sadness. He had finally discovered the truth about his origins, but his biological father had disappeared decades ago. Walter, in the note I found, my father mentions a hidden treasure. Do you know anything about that? Treasure? Thomas was never rich, but... Walter stopped and scratched his head. Now that I think about it, he always talked about some savings he was putting together to give his son a better life. He said he had hidden it all in a safe place. Where could that place be? Thomas knew every stone along this coast. If he hid anything, it must have been in one of the caves near the beach. Marcus felt a new wave of hope. Perhaps there were more clues about his father in the area's caves. Could you show me those caves tomorrow? Of course, my boy. It would be an honor to help you find what your father left behind. Marcus returned home that night with his mind racing. Jennifer was watching television when he arrived. Where have you been all day? She asked without taking her eyes off the screen. Looking into some things about my family. Jennifer turned off the television and faced him. Marcus, we've talked about this. You need to stop digging into the past. Jennifer, I discovered important things today. I think I've found my real family. And what does that change? Your adoptive parents loved you and raised you well. Why isn't that enough? Marcus sat beside her on the couch. Because I need to know where I come from. I need to understand who I am. You're my husband, said Jennifer, taking his hand. Shouldn't that be enough? Of course you're important, but that doesn't erase my need to know my roots. Jennifer sighed and stood up. I'm going to bed. When you're tired of this obsession, let me know. Marcus remained alone in the living room, looking out the window toward the sea. Tomorrow, with Walter's help, he might find the last pieces of his life's puzzle. The next morning, Marcus met Walter at the harbor very early. The fisherman had brought a flashlight and some tools that could be useful for exploring the caves. The caves are about 2 kilometers from here along the coast, explained Walter as they walked. Thomas used to go there to fish on calm days. They walked along the rocky beach until they reached a series of rock formations that created small natural caves. The first cave they explored was empty, just damp rocks and some crustaceans. In the second cave, deeper in, Walter pointed the flashlight at the walls. There were marks on the rocks, as if someone had dug or moved stones. Look at this, said Marcus, pointing to a corner where the stones seemed to have been arranged artificially. They began moving the stones carefully. Behind them, they found a small opening that appeared to have been purposely sealed. Marcus reached into the opening and felt what seemed like fabric. He carefully pulled out a package wrapped in waterproof canvas. What could this be? Murmured Walter. Marcus opened the package with trembling hands. Inside were several letters tied with a red ribbon, some old coins, and a small wooden box. The first letter was addressed simply as, "To my beloved son." Marcus opened it carefully and began to read. My dear son, if you're reading this, it means you managed to follow the clues I left for you. My name is Thomas Crawford, and I am your father. I love you more than words can express, even though I never had the chance to meet you." Marcus had to stop reading for a moment, tears making it hard to see the words. "Go on, my boy," encouraged Walter. "Your father has much to say." Marcus continued reading. "I know that one day you'll question where you came from and why I'm not in your life. The truth is, I fought with all my strength to stay with you and your mother, but circumstances were stronger than my love." The letter went on to explain the details of his relationship with Eleanor, the discovery of her pregnancy, and the pressure from the Mitchell family to separate them. "I saved all my earnings to secure your future. In the wooden box you'll find not just money, but something much more valuable. Proof of your right to the Mitchell family inheritance." Marcus opened the wooden box. Inside were old gold coins, some jewelry, and a legal document that appeared to be a birth certificate. "Walter, this says my parents were legally married," said Marcus, examining the document. "Married, but how? It says here they had a religious ceremony in a neighboring town, 1 month before I was born." Walter took the document and examined it carefully. "If this is true, it means you are the legitimate heir of the Mitchell family." Marcus continued reading the letters. In one of them, Thomas explained that he had discovered a threat from Eleanor's grandmother to disinherit her granddaughter if she didn't get rid of the baby and the fisherman. "I decided to leave to protect you and your mother. If I stayed, the family could take more drastic measures against us. But before leaving, I hid the proof of our marriage and the savings I had gathered over the years. The last letter was the most touching. Son, if we ever meet, know that not a single day has passed without me thinking of you. Always carry the crescent moon mark as a symbol of my eternal love." Marcus and Walter returned to the city in silence, both processing the magnitude of the discoveries. The evidence that Marcus now possessed completely changed the narrative he had known about his origins. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. When they reached the city centre, Marcus made a decision. It was time to confront Mrs. Eleanor with the evidence he had found. They headed to the Windward Inn. Marcus knocked on the door with renewed determination. When Mrs. Eleanor opened it, she saw him accompanied by Walter, and her expression changed from surprise to terror. "What do you want?" she asked with a trembling voice. "Mrs. Eleanor, I need to speak with you about Thomas Crawford and about our son," said Marcus, showing the letters. Mrs. Eleanor looked at the letters and her legs weakened. She leaned on the door to keep from falling. Where did you find this?" "My father left clues for me. He also left this." Marcus showed the marriage document. Mrs. Eleanor looked at the paper and began to cry heavily. "Come in, please. It's time for you to know the full truth." They entered the inn and sat in the main room. Mrs. Eleanor served coffee with trembling hands before she began to speak. "I loved Thomas more than my own life," she began. "When I discovered I was pregnant, it was the happiest and most terrifying day of my life." "Why terrifying?" asked Marcus. "Because I knew my grandmother. She was a rigid woman who controlled the entire family with an iron fist. When she found out about the pregnancy, she threatened to disinherit me and cast me out of the family if I didn't get rid of the baby." "But you were legally married," said Marcus, showing the document. "Yes, we married secretly in the neighboring town. Thomas insisted that we do everything right in the eyes of God, but my grandmother would never recognize that marriage." "Then why did you give the baby up for adoption?" Mrs. Eleanor took a deep breath before continuing. "My grandmother found out about the marriage and threatened something terrible. She said if I didn't give up the baby, she would make something happen to Thomas." "What kind of thing?" "She had powerful connections in the city. She could have Thomas accused of crimes he didn't commit. She could destroy his life completely. I couldn't let that happen." Marcus felt anger and sadness at the same time. "So you chose to protect my father instead of fighting for me?" "It wasn't a choice," said Eleanor through tears. "It was a sacrifice. I thought if I gave you to a good family, both of you would have a chance to be happy away from here." "And Thomas? Did he agree to this?" "Thomas never knew about my grandmother's threat. I lied to him, said I didn't love him anymore, and that I wanted to get rid of the baby. I broke his heart on purpose, so he would leave." "Walter," who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. "Eleanor, you shattered a good man's life." "I know that," she replied, sobbing. "Not a day has gone by that I haven't regretted my decision, but at the time I thought I was protecting both of you." Marcus stood up and began pacing the room. "And then? You never tried to find me?" "I did try. 20 years ago, when my grandmother passed away, I hired a private investigator to locate you. But the family that adopted you had moved and we lost track. You knew where I was all this time?" "Not specifically, but I found out when you started working in Outer Banks 5 years ago. The investigator informed me, but I didn't have the courage to make contact." Marcus stopped in front of the window, looking at the busy street outside. 40 years of unanswered questions, 40 years of feeling incomplete, and now he discovered that his biological mother had known where he was for years. "Why didn't you contact me?" "Because I was afraid of your reaction. What right did I have to show up in your life after abandoning you?" Marcus turned to her. "The right to be my mother." Those words broke Eleanor's last defenses. She stood up and approached him hesitantly. "Marcus, may I call you that? It's my name. Marcus, can you ever forgive me?" Marcus looked at her for a long time. He saw in her eyes the same pain he had carried his whole life, the same sense of loss and incompleteness. "I don't know if I can forgive," he said honestly, "but I want to understand. I want to know the full story of our family." Eleanor nodded, drying her tears. "There's so much you need to know about your grandparents, about the history of this property, about why Thomas left those clues for you." "What clues?" "I only found the letters in the cave." "The letters were just the beginning. Thomas left other things hidden here at the inn before he left." Marcus felt his heart race. "What other things?" "Come, I'll show you." Eleanor led them through corridors Marcus hadn't seen on his previous visit. They climbed a narrow staircase until they reached a dusty attic. In the attic, among old furniture covered with sheets, Eleanor went to a wooden chest in the corner. "Thomas brought this here the night before he left. He asked me to keep it and only open it when our son returned home." She opened the chest, revealing more letters, old photographs, some baby clothes, and a small box with a key inside. Marcus picked up the photographs. They were pictures of Thomas and Eleanor together, clearly in love. In one photo, Eleanor was pregnant, and Thomas had a protective hand on her belly. "You looked very happy," commented Marcus, moved. "We were. The months before your birth were the happiest of my life." Marcus picked up the mysterious key. "What is this for?" "Thomas said it opened something important, but he never told me what. Maybe you can figure it out." Marcus examined the key. It was small and ornate, clearly made to open something special, perhaps a box or a secret compartment. "Can I take this?" he asked. "All of this is rightfully yours," replied Eleanor. "Thomas left everything for you." Marcus spent the rest of the afternoon examining the objects his father had left. Among the letters, he found detailed instructions about places where Thomas had hidden other things around the town. One specific letter caught his attention. In it, Thomas mentioned that he had left something very important in the inn's basement, something that could only be accessed with the special key. "Mrs. Eleanor, may I see the inn's basement?" "Of course, but no one has gone down there for decades. I don't even know if the stairs are still safe." They carefully descended into the damp, dark basement. Marcus used the flashlight he had brought from his cave exploration to light up the space. The basement was full of old boxes, dusty wine bottles, and broken furniture. But in the back, Marcus noticed something that seemed different, a wall that didn't match the rest of the construction. Approaching it, he realized there was a small lock hidden behind an old painting hanging on the wall. "Here!" exclaimed Marcus, showing the lock to the others. He inserted the key and it turned perfectly. A small compartment opened, revealing another package wrapped in leather. Marcus removed the package and carefully opened it. Inside was Thomas's diary, more gold coins, and a document that made him gasp in surprise. "What is it?" asked Walter. It's a deed," stammered Marcus. "A deed for the property adjacent to the inn." Eleanor approached and examined the document. "That's not possible. That property has always belonged to my family. According to this document, Thomas legally purchased it 2 months before I was born," explained Marcus. "And here it says He leaves it to his legitimate son. Walter whistled softly. Thomas was smarter than we thought. Marcus opened Thomas's diary and began reading the last entries, written shortly before his departure from town. Tomorrow I leave this town I love so much, leaving behind the woman of my life and the son I will never get to know. But I don't leave empty-handed. For months I worked day and night to earn enough money to buy the property next to the Mitchells' Inn. Marcus continued reading. I know Eleanor is being pressured by her family, but one day our son will return, and when that happens, he will have legal rights to part of the heritage the Mitchell family holds so dear. Perhaps then he will achieve the equality I never had in life. Your father planned all this? Asked Eleanor, impressed. It seems so. He knew you were being pressured and found a way to ensure I had rights in the family, even though I was given up for adoption. Marcus closed the diary and looked at Eleanor. Did you have any idea about any of this? Thomas never told me about the property. If I had known, maybe I would have had the courage to stand up to my grandmother. They returned to the main room of the inn, everyone processing the implications of the discoveries. Marcus was now not just the lost son of the Mitchell family, he was legally the owner of a valuable property in the historic center. Marcus, I need to tell you something else, said Eleanor hesitantly. What? The property that Thomas bought. It's currently rented to a company that wants to build a modern hotel on the site. The lease expires at the end of this month. Marcus felt a new wave of complications arising. And that means? It means you have the legal right to reclaim the property and decide what to do with it. But I didn't even know it existed until now. The document is clear, said Walter, examining the deed again. Thomas registered everything properly. You are the legal owner. That night, Marcus returned home with his mind more confused than ever. Jennifer was waiting for him in the living room. Marcus, we need to talk, she said as soon as he entered. I need to talk to you too. They sat on the couch and Marcus began to tell her everything he had discovered over the past 2 days. Jennifer listened silently, her expression changing from irritation to surprise and then to concern. So, you really found your biological family, she said when he finished. I did, and I found out I have rights to a valuable property. And now? What are you going to do? Marcus held her hands. I don't know yet. This is all very new, very confusing. Marcus, I'm afraid of what this will do to our marriage. Why? Because you've always felt like something was missing in your life. Now that you've found your family, I'm afraid I won't be enough anymore. Marcus looked into her eyes. Jennifer, discovering my origin doesn't change how I feel about you. You're still the woman I chose to share my life with. But will you want to move closer to your biological mother? Will you want to manage this property? I don't know yet. I need time to process all this. They fell silent for a few moments, each lost in their own thoughts. Marcus, there's something I need to tell you too, Jennifer said finally. What? 3 months ago, I got a call from a woman who identified herself as a private investigator. She asked about you, wanted to confirm if you lived here and if you were adopted. Marcus looked at her in shock. And you didn't tell me? I thought it was some scam or something like that. I told her not to call again and hung up. Jennifer, that investigator was probably working for Mrs. Eleanor. If you had told me, I could have discovered the truth months ago. I didn't want you to become obsessed with this again. Marcus stood up, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. You had no right to hide this from me. Marcus, please understand, I just wanted to protect our family. Protect from what? From the truth? Jennifer began to cry. Protect from you discovering you had a wealthy family and deciding our humble life wasn't enough anymore. Marcus realized Jennifer's fears were deep and genuine, but still felt betrayed by the omission. Jennifer, I need some time to think about all this. I'll spend a few days at the inn to try to better understand my story and decide what to do next. Are you leaving me? I'm not leaving you. I'm trying to figure out who I am so I can be a better husband. Marcus packed a small bag and returned to the Windward Inn that same night. Mrs. Eleanor welcomed him with restrained joy. You can stay as long as you need, she said. This is your home as much as mine. During the following days, Marcus explored every corner of the inn and the adjacent property. Mrs. Eleanor told him stories about the Mitchell family, about the construction of the inn in the 18th century, and about the traditions that had been maintained through the generations. He also spent much time with Walter, hearing more stories about Thomas and trying to understand what kind of man his father had been. Thomas was a man of principles, Walter told him during one of their conversations. I've never seen someone work so hard to get what he wanted, honestly. How did he get the money to buy the property? He fished during the day and worked at the dock loading goods at night. Sometimes he took extra jobs on weekends. For months, he saved every penny. Marcus admired his father's determination, but also felt sadness that he had worked so hard for a future he never got to see. On the 4th day of his stay at the inn, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. A woman of about 50 knocked on the door asking for him. "My name is Sharon Crawford," she introduced herself. "I'm Thomas's niece." Marcus felt his heart race. "Niece? I heard through Walter's friends that you found the things my uncle had hidden. I came from Charlotte to meet you." Marcus invited her in, and Sharon sat in the main room of the inn. She had dark eyes very similar to the ones Marcus saw in the mirror. "You look a lot like my uncle," Sharon commented, "especially the eyes and the shape of your face." "Did you know my father?" "Of course, Thomas was my favorite uncle. When he disappeared 40 years ago, the whole family was desperate looking for him." Marcus leaned forward. "Did you look for him?" "For years. My grandfather, who was Thomas's brother, hired investigators, placed ads in newspapers, did everything. But Thomas had vanished completely." "And did you know about me?" Sharon smiled sadly. "We knew he had fallen in love with a girl from a wealthy family and that she was expecting a baby. But when Thomas disappeared, we lost contact with everything that had happened here." "Where is the rest of the family now?" "My parents passed away about 10 years ago, but I have 2 brothers and several cousins. Everyone will be thrilled to know we found you." Marcus felt a wave of emotion. Not only had he found his biological mother, but he discovered he had an entire paternal family who had worried about him over the years. "Sharon, do you know what happened to Thomas after he left here?" "Actually, yes. We have letters he sent to my grandfather during the first years after his departure." Marcus could hardly believe it. He wrote to the family. "Thomas moved to Miami and worked as a fisherman in a cooperative. From the letters, we know he never remarried and died about 15 years ago from heart problems." The news of his father's death hit Marcus like a punch in the stomach. He had spent 40 years dreaming of the possibility of meeting him, and now he found out it was too late. Did he mention anything about me in the letters?" Sharon took his hand. "Marcus, every letter mentioned you. Thomas wrote about hoping to reunite with his son one day, and how he planned to come back here when he had enough courage. But he never came back. The last letter we received was 20 years ago. In it, Thomas said he had discovered where you lived and was gathering the courage to make contact. After that, we heard nothing more." Marcus realized his father had spent the last years of his life struggling with the same pain and uncertainty he himself had felt. Both had lived with the feeling that something fundamental was missing. "Sharon, did you bring the letters?" "I brought copies of some. The originals are kept at the family home." She took an envelope from her bag and handed it to Marcus. "This is the last letter Thomas wrote to my grandfather." Marcus opened the letter with trembling hands. "My dear brother, I have discovered where my son is living. He is married and seems to have a happy life. Part of me wants to knock on his door and introduce myself, but another part is afraid of destroying the peace he has managed to build. What right do I have to appear in his life after 40 years? Perhaps it is better to continue just watching from afar and knowing that he is well." Marcus had to stop reading, tears preventing him from seeing the words. "He watched me from afar?" he asked with a choked voice. "According to the letter, yes. Thomas came to Outer Banks a few times in his last years, just to see you from a distance. The idea that his father had been so close but never made contact was both moving and devastating. Why didn't he try to talk to me? I think he was afraid of rejection. Thomas carried a lot of guilt for leaving 40 years ago, even though he knew he had no choice." "Mrs. Eleanor, who had remained quiet throughout the conversation, finally spoke. "If I had known Thomas was alive and looking for Marcus, I would have done something." Sharon looked at Eleanor with curiosity. "You are—" "I am Eleanor Mitchell, Marcus's mother." Sharon's expression changed to a mix of surprise and something that seemed like resentment. "You are the woman who broke my uncle's heart." "Sharon," began Marcus. "No, Marcus. You don't know how Thomas suffered. He told me he cried every night thinking about you and the woman he loved." Eleanor lowered her head. "I know I made terrible mistakes. If I could turn back time—" "But you can't," interrupted Sharon. "My uncle died alone, carrying a pain that you caused." Marcus felt he needed to step in before the situation got out of control. "Sharon, I understand your anger, but Mrs. Eleanor also suffered. She was pressured by the family and thought she was protecting my father." "Protecting? She destroyed his life." "And hers too," replied Marcus. "We all lost 40 years. That could have been different." Sharon took a deep breath, trying to control herself. "Marcus, I didn't come here to fight. I came to meet the nephew I never had, and to bring news from your father's family." "I know, and I thank you for that. The whole family wants to meet you. They're planning a gathering in Charlotte next weekend, if you'd like to come." Marcus felt a mix of anxiety and emotion. A family reunion? There will be about 20 people. Cousins, uncles, nieces. Everyone wants to meet Thomas's son. The prospect of meeting an entire family he didn't even know existed was overwhelming, but also exciting. "Can I bring my wife?" "Of course. We want to meet your whole family." That night, Marcus called Jennifer to tell her about Sharon and the family reunion. "More family?" said Jennifer with a sigh. "Marcus, this is getting too complicated." "Jennifer, these people have been looking for me for decades. They deserve to know me, and I deserve to know them. What if they don't like me? What if they think I'm not good enough for you?" "Why would you think that?" "Because you found out you come from 2 traditional families, and I'm just an elementary school teacher from a simple family." Marcus felt he needed to talk to Jennifer in person. "I'm coming home. We need to talk properly about all this." When Marcus got home, he found Jennifer packing. "Where are you going?" "I'm going to visit my sister for a few days. I need to think." "Jennifer, don't run away from me now." "I'm not running away. I'm giving you space to figure out what you really want." Marcus held her arms. "What I want is for us to face this together." "Marcus, you've changed a lot in the last few days. You're talking about properties, inheritances, family reunions. This isn't the life we built together. No, but it can be part of the life we build from now on." Jennifer sat on the bed. "I'm afraid you'll discover you deserve something better than what I can offer." Marcus sat beside her. "Jennifer, for the past 15 years, you've been the most constant and loving person in my life. Why would that change now?" "Because now you know who you really are. You have an identity, a history, a family. You don't have to settle for me anymore." "I never settled for you," said Marcus firmly. "I chose you, and I keep choosing you." Jennifer looked into his eyes. "Then why do I feel like I'm losing you?" "Because I'm discovering myself, and it's scaring both of us. But that doesn't mean I want a life different from the one we have." They talked through the night, Marcus reassuring Jennifer that his discoveries about the past didn't erase the plans they had made together for the future. The following weekend, Marcus and Jennifer traveled to Charlotte for the family reunion. Sharon had organized a lunch at her parents' house, which was now managed by her older brother. When they arrived at the house, Marcus was greeted by nearly 20 people who hugged him, as if they had known him for years. The physical resemblance between him and several family members was striking. "You're the spitting image of Thomas when he was your age," commented an older cousin, showing old photographs. During lunch, Marcus heard dozens of stories about his father. He discovered that Thomas was known in the family for his generosity, his sense of humor, and his determination. "Your father always said that one day he would own his own boat," one of the uncles recounted. "He worked tirelessly to achieve his dreams." "And did he succeed?" "In part. In his later years, he had a small fishing business in Miami. He didn't get rich, but he was respected in the community." Jennifer, initially tense, began to relax when she realized that Thomas's family was simple and welcoming. They treated her with the same affection they showed Marcus. Thomas would be happy to know that Marcus found a woman who truly loves him, Sharon said to Jennifer during dessert. How do you know I love him? It's in your eyes when you look at him. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the afternoon, Sharon's older brother, named Robert, took Marcus to see some items that had belonged to Thomas. We kept everything, hoping that one day he would return, Robert explained. When he died, we decided to preserve it as a memorial. Among the items were fishing tools, some clothes, and a small collection of books. Marcus flipped through one of the books and found notes in the margin, written in his father's hand. One specific note caught his attention. Marcus must be about 15 now. I wonder if he likes fishing like I do. He thought of you constantly, Robert said, noticing what Marcus was reading. Robert, do you know if my father left any documents about the property he bought in the Outer Banks? Property? What property? Marcus explained about the deed he had found. Robert was surprised. Thomas never mentioned anything about a property, but he was private about his business. Do you think he might have left other documents somewhere? It's possible. He had a small apartment in Miami. When he died, I sealed it and kept the key, hoping that one day you would show up. Marcus felt a new wave of emotion. Do you still have the key? I do, and if you want, I can take you there next week. At the end of the day, when Marcus and Jennifer said goodbye to the family, both felt changed by the experience. In the car during the drive back, Jennifer finally put into words what she was feeling. Marcus, I understand now why finding your family is so important to you. Why? Because they complete parts of you that I never could. I see traces of you in them, mannerisms, ways of speaking. It's like you found pieces that were missing in a puzzle. Jennifer, that doesn't diminish your importance in my life. No, but it helps me understand that you needed this to become a whole person. Marcus took her hand, and now that I'm becoming more complete, I want to share it with you. When they returned to the Outer Banks, Marcus went straight to the inn to tell Mrs. Eleanor about the family meeting. She listened to everything with genuine interest and joy. I'm glad you found Thomas's family, she said. They seem like wonderful people. They are. And it makes me think about our situation here. How so? Mrs. Eleanor, I have legal rights to the property next door, but that doesn't mean I want to take anything from you. Marcus, you're my son. If you have rights to something, it's because you deserve it. But I'd like to propose a partnership. Eleanor looked at him curiously. What kind of partnership? The property my father bought is rented to a company that wants to build a modern hotel. The contract expires at the end of the month. Yes, I know. How about if we cancel that contract and use the property to expand the inn? We could create a historical complex that preserves the family tradition, but offers more comfort to guests. Eleanor seemed intrigued. Have you thought through the details? I've been discussing this with Jennifer. She has experience in administration, and I understand construction because of my work. And the company currently leasing? We'll have to compensate them for breaking the contract, but the money my father left should be enough for that, and for the initial renovations. Eleanor stood up and walked to the window, contemplating the view of the property. Marcus, are you sure you want to partner with me after everything I've done? Mrs. Eleanor, I spent 40 years feeling incomplete. Now that I've found you and learned our family's history, I want to truly be part of it. And Jennifer, does she agree with this? She's the one who gave me the idea, said it might be time for us to build something new together, based on history, but looking toward the future. Eleanor turned to him with tears in her eyes. Marcus, would you give me a second chance to be your mother? Not a second chance, corrected Marcus. A real first chance. They embraced for the first time as mother and son, 40 years after Marcus's birth. In the following weeks, Marcus, Jennifer, and Eleanor worked together on the inn's expansion project. Jennifer moved into one of the inn's suites to help with planning, and a warm relationship gradually developed between her and Eleanor. Jennifer is a smart and dedicated woman, Eleanor commented to Marcus during one of their conversations. "Thomas would be proud of the choice you made." "I hope so." "I'm sure. He always said the most important thing was to find someone you truly love, and who is your best friend." Marcus smiled. "Jennifer is exactly that." Meanwhile, Robert had kept his promise and taken Marcus to see Thomas's apartment in Miami. It was a simple but well-kept place with a view of the ocean. Among Thomas's belongings, Marcus found a more recent diary and several unsent letters, all addressed to him. One of the letters, dated just 2 years before Thomas's death, was particularly moving. "My dear son, today I turned 63 and feel time is passing too quickly. I know where you live, I know you're married and seem happy, but I don't have the courage to appear in your life after all these years. Perhaps it's better to continue loving you from afar than to risk causing turmoil in your life." Marcus realized his father had spent his final years struggling with the same dilemma he himself had faced, the fear of rejection versus the need to connect with lost family. In the apartment, Marcus also found a box with over 1,000 photographs Thomas had secretly taken of him over the years. There were pictures of Marcus going to work, walking on the beach, talking with Jennifer at the market. "He really was watching me," murmured Marcus, flipping through the photographs. "For years," confirmed Robert. "Thomas would come to Outer Banks at least 3 times a year just to see you." Among the photographs, Marcus found a series of images of himself and Jennifer during their wedding. Thomas had been there, hidden among the guests, capturing one of the most important moments of his son's life. The discovery was emotionally overwhelming. Marcus realized that, in a way, his father had participated in his life even from a distance. Back in Outer Banks, Marcus showed the photographs to Jennifer and Eleanor. Both were touched by Thomas's silent dedication. "He truly loved you," said Jennifer, examining a photo where Marcus was laughing during the wedding ceremony. "Yes, he did," agreed Eleanor. "And I prevented him from showing that love directly." "Mrs. Eleanor, we've already talked about that. The important thing now is to build something positive from what we've discovered. During the following months, the In-Expansion project took shape. They hired heritage architecture specialists to ensure the renovations preserved the building's original character. The company leasing the adjacent property initially resisted cancelling the contract, but when Marcus presented the legal documents proving his ownership, they accepted a fair settlement and withdrew. The renovations began in winter, when the inn traditionally had fewer guests. Marcus discovered he had a natural talent for supervising construction, perhaps inherited from his father, who had been known for his craftsmanship. During the renovation process, they made a surprising discovery in the basement of the adjacent property. Behind a false wall, they found a small buried chest containing more letters from Thomas and a considerable amount of antique gold coins. A letter inside the chest explained that Thomas had purchased the property not just as an investment, but because he'd discovered it was part of the original Mitchell family land, sold decades earlier, to settle debts. "My son," the letter said, "by reclaiming this property, you will not only be exercising your rights, but also returning to the Mitchell family, something that was lost. Perhaps this will help heal the wounds my presence in your mother's life caused." "Your father thought of everything," commented Eleanor, reading the letter. "Even in death, he wanted to fix the problems he couldn't resolve in life. The gold coins found were enough to fund the entire renovation and still leave a substantial reserve for operating the expanded inn." During the construction, Marcus and Eleanor spent much time talking about the Mitchell family history. She told him about her grandparents, great-grandparents, and the traditions that had been maintained through generations. "Our family has always had a special connection to the sea," Eleanor shared. "Your ancestors were fishermen before becoming merchants and property owners. Then it makes sense that my father was a fisherman too." Thomas didn't choose the profession by chance. He researched our history and knew he was connecting with his own roots through fishing. Marcus was impressed by the depth of his father's planning. Every decision Thomas had made seemed carefully thought out to benefit the son he never got to raise. Jennifer, who had taken temporary leave from teaching to help with the inn, discovered she had a talent for hospitality. She created educational programs for guests about local history and developed partnerships with area schools. Jennifer is turning the inn into a cultural centre, observed Eleanor with admiration. She was always creative, said Marcus with pride. She just needed an opportunity to show it. The reopening of the expanded inn was scheduled for the 1-year anniversary of finding the message in the bottle. Marcus had insisted on the symbolic date. The week before reopening, Marcus's paternal family came from Charlotte for the celebration. Sharon brought more photographs and documents of Thomas that they'd found in the family home. Among the documents was a will Thomas had made shortly before dying, leaving all his assets to my son Marcus Henderson, should he ever be found, and to the Crawford family, should he not be. Thomas never lost hope that you would be found, said Sharon during the reading of the will. The will also revealed that Thomas had left specific instructions for his ashes to be scattered in the sea near Outer Banks, where my heart has always remained. He wanted to come home, said Marcus, moved. And now you can, replied Eleanor. We can have a ceremony at the inn's reopening. The reopening ceremony of the Windward Inn was an emotional event that brought the whole town together. The mayor was present, along with representatives from the State Historic Preservation Office, who praised the preservation project. Marcus gave a speech during the ceremony, telling the story of how he had found his family through a bottle on the beach. Many of those present were moved by the narrative. This inn represents more than just a family business, said Marcus. It stands as proof that it's never too late to find our place in the world and build bridges over the wounds of the past. After the official speech, Marcus, Eleanor, Jennifer, and the Crawford family went to a private beach behind the inn for the ceremony of scattering Thomas's ashes. Walter, now over 80 years old, had been invited to lead the ceremony. He spoke about Thomas as the honest and loving man he had known. Thomas, my old friend, said Walter, casting the ashes into the wind over the sea. Now you can rest in peace. Your son has found his way back home. As the ashes scattered over the waves, Marcus felt a sense of closure and peace he had never experienced before. It was as if his father had finally returned home. That night during the reopening party, Marcus and Jennifer danced on the inn's porch under a starry sky. The music played by a local trio echoed softly over the sound of the waves. Marcus, are you happy? Asked Jennifer. I am whole, he replied. For the first time in my life, I feel like I know exactly where I belong. And me? Where do I fit into this new life of yours? Marcus pulled her closer. You are the center of everything. Without you, none of this would have made sense. They danced in silence for a few moments, watching the guests and family celebrating around them. Marcus, there's something I want to tell you, said Jennifer. What? I'm pregnant. Marcus stopped dancing and looked into her eyes. Really? I found out last week, but I wanted to wait until the inn reopened to tell you. Marcus lifted her off the ground and spun her around, both laughing with happiness. The other guests noticed the celebration and began to applaud, even without knowing the reason. Eleanor is going to be a grandmother, said Marcus, setting Jennifer back down. She'll be thrilled, and the child will grow up knowing the whole family story from the beginning. That night, after all the guests had left, Marcus walked alone on the beach where he had found the bottle a year earlier. The full moon lit up the sand, and the waves broke gently on the shore. He thought of Thomas, of all the sacrifices his father had made, of all the nights he had spent looking at the same sea, dreaming of the son he couldn't raise. Marcus touched the birthmark on his shoulder, which was no longer a mystery but a symbol of the eternal bond with the father he had loved from afar for 40 years. A gentle breeze blew from the sea, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. For a moment, Marcus had the feeling that his father was there with him, finally at peace. The next day, Marcus found Mrs. Eleanor in the inn's garden, tending to the flowers she had planted decades ago. "Good morning, Mother," he said, using for the first time the word he had avoided for months. Eleanor looked up, surprised and moved. "Good morning, my son. Mother, Jennifer and I want you to be the first to know. You're going to be a grandmother." Eleanor dropped the watering can and hugged Marcus tightly. A grandchild. Thomas would be so happy. "We were thinking if it's a boy we'd like to name him Thomas." "Marcus, that would be a wonderful honor." They stood embraced in the garden, surrounded by the flowers Eleanor had cared for alone for so many years. Now at last, she had a family to share her life with. In the following months, the Windward Inn became one of the most sought-after destinations on the Charlotte coast. The story of Marcus and his family had spread through social media and local press, attracting visitors interested not only in the comfort but also in the emotional history of the place. Jennifer developed a special tour called Lost Routes, where she told the story of the bottle and helped other guests who were searching for their own family origins. Marcus discovered he had a natural gift for storytelling and often led evening sessions on the inn's porch, narrating not only his own journey, but also stories of the region that Eleanor and Walter had told him. During one of these sessions, a guest approached Marcus with an old bottle. "I found this on the beach this morning," the man said. "There's something written inside." Marcus examined the bottle and immediately recognized the style. It was similar to the one he had found, but more recent. When they opened the bottle, they found a letter written by an elderly woman searching for her brother lost during World War II. "It seems the beaches of the Outer Banks are a place where lost families find each other," Jennifer commented. From that day on, Marcus and Jennifer began helping other people find their lost families. The inn became an informal family reunification center, where people from all over the United States came to seek their roots. Sharon, who had become a regular visitor to the inn, suggested they create a formal archive of family stories from the region. "How many families have been separated over the years by wars, poverty, prejudice?" she questioned. "Perhaps we can help others find what you found." The idea flourished, and soon the Windward Inn had a library specializing in genealogy and family history. University students came to do research, and professional genealogists offered free consultations to guests. Walter, despite his advanced age, became the inn's main storyteller. His memories of decades of life on the coast provided valuable clues for people looking for lost relatives. "This beach has seen many stories," Walter would tell the curious guests. "Every wave brings and takes pieces of human life. The important thing is to pay attention when they return." 6 months after the reopening, Jennifer gave birth to Thomas Mitchell Henderson. The baby was born with a small mark on his shoulder, not exactly like Marcus's, but clearly a family trait. "The marks repeat through the generations," Eleanor observed, holding her grandson for the first time. "It's as if the family left signs so no one would be completely lost." Thomas's baptism was celebrated on the beach, with the entire Crawford family present. Sharon was chosen as the godmother, symbolizing the union of the two family lines. During the ceremony, Marcus read a letter he had written for his son. "My dear Thomas, you were named after an extraordinary man I never got to meet, but who loved me from before my birth. You will grow up knowing every detail of our family history, but also knowing that the most important thing is not where we came from, but how we choose to love the people around us." That night, after all the guests had left, Marcus walked along the beach again, this time carrying his son in his arms. "Thomas, this is the beach where it all began," he whispered to the baby, "where your grandfather left clues so I could find our family. One day when you grow up, I'll tell you the whole story." The moonlight illuminated the baby's face, who slept peacefully in his father's arms. Marcus felt a deep connection with all the generations that had walked along that same beach, his fishing ancestors, Thomas dreaming of the future, and now himself carrying the next generation of the family. 2 years after Thomas's birth, Marcus received an unexpected call. A man introduced himself as a researcher from the National Archives and said he had found documents that might interest him. "Mr. Marcus, we're digitizing old archives and found correspondence between your family and England dating back to the 17th century. "Correspondence?" "Yes. It seems the first Mitchells who came to the United States maintained regular contact with family in England. There are letters, business documents, and even a treasure map." Marcus felt a familiar shiver. A treasure map? It's a period expression. Actually, they're records of properties and investments the family had in Europe. Some of these investments might still exist. The possibility of uncovering more layers of family history excited Marcus, but it also made him reflect on how complex his journey of self-discovery had become. When he told Eleanor about the call, she smiled mysteriously. "Marcus, there are things about our family that even I don't fully know. My grandmother always hinted that there was more to the story than she told." "What kind of things?" "Properties in Europe, connections with the English court, maybe even noble titles, but she passed away before telling me the details." The prospect of discovering that his family had even deeper roots and perhaps additional resources was thrilling, but Marcus had learned that true wealth lay in the human connections he had built. "Mother, no matter what we discover about the past, what really matters is what we've built here." "I agree," said Eleanor, "but it would be interesting to know the full story, wouldn't it?" Marcus decided to investigate the National Archives' findings, more out of historical curiosity than expectations of material gain. The trip to Washington to examine the documents revealed an even richer history than he had imagined. The first Mitchells in the United States weren't just merchants, but were part of a network of English families that funded explorations and established trade routes. Among the documents were detailed maps of the 17th century American coast, including the region where the Outer Banks now lies. There were also references to secure deposits along the coast, places where merchants hid goods and money during times of instability. One specific document mentioned a crescent moon mark as an identification symbol for authorized family members. The birthmark Marcus carried wasn't just a genetic trait, but apparently part of a family tradition dating back centuries. "Does this mean the mark has always been a sign of belonging to the family?" Marcus asked the researcher. "According to these documents, yes. There are records of at least 10 generations of the family with this specific mark." Marcus was amazed by the depth of family traditions he had unconsciously carried his entire life. When he returned to the Outer Banks, he shared the discoveries with his family. Jennifer was fascinated by the idea that her son carried a mark connecting the family across centuries. "Thomas isn't just our son," she said. "He's the continuation of a lineage that has survived wars, migrations, and separations over hundreds of years." Eleanor, now over 70, decided it was time to formally record the entire family history. She began writing her memoirs, including the new discoveries and Marcus's saga. "I want future generations to have access to our whole story," she explained, "so that no child grows up without knowing where they came from." The project became a collective work, with Marcus contributing his perspective as an adopted son who found his roots, Jennifer adding insights about how the discoveries affected the contemporary family, and Sharon contributing memories from the paternal family. Walter, now the unofficial patriarch of the fishing community, dictated his recollections to Marcus, who carefully transcribed them. "This story isn't just about you," Walter said during one recording session. "It's about how families can lose and find each other, how love can survive any separation." The book, Footprints in the Sand, A Story of Family Lost and Found, was published 3 years after Thomas's birth. The launch took place at the Windward Inn itself, attended by local authorities, researchers, and dozens of families who had been reunited through programs developed by Marcus and Jennifer. During the launch, Marcus read an excerpt from the final chapter. "I discovered that finding our family isn't just about blood or genetics. It's about choosing to belong, about creating connections that transcend time and circumstances. My father Thomas loved me before I was even born. My mother Eleanor carried the pain of separation for 40 years, and my wife Jennifer supported me on this journey of discovery, even when it threatened our stability." He paused and looked at the audience, seeing tears in many people's eyes. "But I also learned that family is something we build every day. It's Walter, who became my chosen grandfather. It's Sharon and the entire Crawford family, who welcomed me as if I'd never been absent. It's every person who finds their own bottle on life's beach and has the courage to follow it to the end." After the book's release, the Windward Inn became a pilgrimage destination for people searching for their own lost families. Marcus and Jennifer developed a structured genealogical search program, including workshops, consultations, and even expeditions to locations where historical documents might be found. 5 years after finding the bottle, Marcus was again walking along the beach during an exceptionally low tide. This time, however, he wasn't alone. Thomas, now a curious 4-year-old boy, ran ahead, searching for shells and treasures in the sand. "Daddy, what's that?" the boy shouted, pointing at something glinting in the sand. Marcus approached and saw another old bottle half buried in the sand. His heart raced at the familiarity of the scene. "It's a bottle, son. Let's see if there's anything inside." They carefully extracted the bottle and discovered there was a message inside. Marcus opened the bottle and retrieved a more modern-looking paper, clearly written recently. The message said, "My name is Linda Henderson. 50 years ago I gave up my daughter for adoption here in Outer Banks. She would be 45 years old now, and named Sarah. If anyone finds this message, please help me find her. My address is—" Thomas looked at his father with curiosity. "Are we going to help her, Daddy?" Marcus smiled and hugged his son. "Of course we will, little one, that's what we do." That afternoon, Marcus called the number on the note and spoke with Linda Henderson. She cried upon learning someone had found her message and explained she'd been coming to the beach every year for decades, throwing bottles into the sea, hoping one would reach her daughter. "I never thought it would work," Linda said over the phone. "But I heard your story on television and thought I'd try. Linda, we're going to help you find Sarah. We have experience with this." 2 weeks later, through adoption records and social media, Marcus and his team managed to locate Sarah, who was now a teacher in Chicago and mother of 3 children. The reunion between Linda and Sarah was held at the Windward Inn, becoming another story of family brought together through the work that Marcus had started. During the reunion ceremony, Marcus looked around the room filled with families who had reconnected through the inn's programs. There were parents who had found children given up for adoption, siblings separated in childhood who reunited in adulthood, and even distant cousins who had discovered lost family connections. "Jennifer, look what we started," he whispered to his wife. "No, Marcus," she replied. "Look what your father started when he had the courage to hide that first bottle on the beach." That night, after Linda and Sarah left to spend more time together, Marcus walked one last time to the beach where it had all begun. Thomas was sleeping peacefully at home, and Jennifer was pregnant with their second child. Marcus looked at the sea under the moonlight and thought of all the families still waiting to be reunited, all the bottles that could still be found on the beach of life. He touched the birthmark on his shoulder, now no longer a symbol of unanswered questions, but a mark of belonging, of continuity, of love that transcends generations. A larger wave broke on the beach, wetting his bare feet. For a moment, Marcus imagined he could hear Thomas's voice carried by the sea wind. "Thank you for finding the way back home." Marcus smiled and turned toward the inn, where his family, the one he had found and the one he had chosen, waited for him. The light in the windows of the Windward Inn shone like a beacon for all the lost families still navigating toward home. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Marcus made the right decisions throughout his journey? We would love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.